In 1963, a 17-year-old actress met the Beatles backstage at the Royal Albert Hall. Over the next 5 years, she became an integral part of Paul McCartney's life. I met Jane Asher when she was sent by the Radio Times to cover a concert we were in at the Royal Albert Hall. We all fancied her. We'd thought she was blonde because we had only ever seen her on black and white telly, but she turned out to be a redhead. I tried pulling her, succeeded, and we were boyfriend and girlfriend for quite a long time. This is the story of Paul and Jane. Through 6 songs Paul wrote about her. Jane and Paul were together during one of the most productive periods of his life, between his early rock and roll fame and a time when his songwriting grew more ambitious. In late 1963, Paul was sharing an apartment that Brian Epstein had arranged for him and the other Beatles. Jane's family offered him the attic room at their home on 57 Wimpole Street, where he would live for nearly 3 years.
It was very generous of them to let me stay in their house, actually, and Jane was my girlfriend at the time, so it was very comforting to me.
Paul grew up in a council house in Liverpool. The Ashers were a different world. Doctors, actors, musicians. The house was full of books and art, and conversation at dinner unlike anything Paul had known. Jane's mother, Margaret, taught music. Paul's own mother had died 7 years earlier, and he had not lived somewhere that felt like a family home since.
Her mother, Margaret, was a great woman. Having lost my mother, so it was great to have a kind of surrogate mother. And yeah, I was lucky. I had this little room at the top, and I managed to get a little piano in there. So it was a bit like that.
Paul wrote "And I Love Her" in that house, not long after he moved in. Precisely because Jane was my girlfriend, I wanted to tell her there that I loved her.
It was one of Paul's first attempts at writing a love song, really. And it was a soft song. It was everything that John couldn't write and didn't want to write. And John always sort of attacked Paul for his soft underbelly, which was his capability to move people like this.
And I was just thinking actually about my song, "And I Love Her." I give her all my love. I had that, but then George comes in with "do do do do." Now you think about that, that's the song.
It had that soft and gentle accompaniment, and it was a great one. It's still one of the best songs he's written.
In spring 1964, Paul and Jane sailed through the Virgin Islands with Ringo and Maureen Starkey. Paul wrote "Things We Said Today" on that trip. Both of their careers meant regular periods apart, Jane's acting work and Paul's touring schedule. The song doesn't describe missing someone. It's written from a moment further ahead, looking back on the present as if it were already the past. It was a slightly nostalgic thing already, a future nostalgia. We'll remember the things we said today, sometime in the future.
Things we said today. Try to see it my way.
By 1965, arguments between Paul and Jane were no longer rare. Jane wanted to continue her acting career. Paul wanted her closer to home. Neither was willing to give much ground. "We Can Work It Out" was the result of one of these arguments. "I started writing the song to try to figure my way out of feeling bad after an argument," said Paul. The lyric reads as a plea for peace, but it's built on Paul's own terms. He brought the song to John Lennon to finish. John wrote the harder-edged middle section, urging his listener to stop arguing because time is short. George Harrison suggested the waltz time break, giving the song an odd, stumbling rhythm right where the argument sits. Paul later mentioned, "The lyrics might have been personal. It saves you going to a psychiatrist." Late in 1965, Jane took a role with the Bristol Old Vic Theatre Company. It was serious, demanding stage work, and it meant leaving London for weeks at a time. Paul told Beatles biographer Hunter Davies, "I wanted her to give up work completely. I knew it was selfish. It caused a few rows. Jane left me once and went off to Bristol to act. It was shattering to be without her. The physical distance led to communication breakdowns. Jane's absences and occasional refusal to answer phone calls directly inspired Paul to write the Motown-flavored track, You Won't See Me. The song's subject? A man calling and no one picking up. Where You Won't See Me showed Paul pleading, I'm Looking Through You showed him pulling back, acting as though he no longer needed an answer. Paul was still living with Jane's family when he wrote the song.
The Ashes house in Wimpole Street, a very small attic room with one window. Perfect for an artist. There wasn't any room for me to keep my records, but somehow I had a piano in there. A small, sawn-off piano that stood by my bed.
The lyrics describe someone the narrator once thought he knew, now looking back at him with nothing familiar left. It was colder than anything Paul had written about Jane up to that point. Less a confrontation than an attempt to convince himself he had already moved on. I remember specifically this one being about that, getting rid of some emotional baggage. I'm looking through you, and you're not there. Early in 1966, Paul and Jane went on a skiing holiday in Switzerland, not long after another argument. He began writing a song, originally titled, Why Did It Die? He didn't write himself into the song as the one who got hurt. He wrote from outside the relationship, describing a woman going through her morning routine, no longer needing the man in the room with her. In I'm Looking Through You, Paul showed himself as self-sufficient. Here, though, the woman is in control. He had looked through her, but now she looks past him. For no one predicts a time when all the things she said will come back to haunt him. Possibly a reference to Things We Said Today, an earlier song about Jane. In a similar way, the provisional title, Why Did It Die, echoed the earlier hope of And I Love Her, that a love like ours could never die. By late 1967, Paul was the only Beatle still unmarried. On Christmas Day, he finally proposed to Jane. But within months, the relationship had unraveled, worn down by distance and by Paul's own infidelity. On July 20th, 1968, Jane appeared on D-Time, then BBC's most popular talk show, and told the British public that the engagement was over. I haven't broken it off, but it is broken off, finished. She never gave another interview about the relationship. All that was left were songs.